Thanks for having me. I'm Owen Goss. I'm just going to wait for my first slide to kick in and then we'll be off. All right. As I said, I'm Owen Goss. I'm an independent game designer and developer, and I run a one-person studio here in Guelph called Streaming Color Studios. I used to work for big games companies in Vancouver, but now I work for myself, making the kinds of games that I love to play. My journey into game development starts in my childhood, so let me introduce you to my parents, Andrew and Sandra Goss. They are both jewelers and craftspeople. My early childhood was spent near Owen Sound in a house that my parents designed and built themselves. We lived in the country, so most of my early childhood memories are of playing outside. While my brother and I spent a lot of time outside as children, it was inside the house that there was a lot of encouragement in all things creative. I have a lot of fond memories of drawing or painting as children, and art wasn't something that you did on the side, it was an integral part of life. When I was 7 years old, my parents bought a cottage on Georgian Bay, and the cottage felt very removed from things as it had no running water, no indoor toilet, and my parents had a very strict no TV, no computers rule. My brother and I spent our summers there exploring forests, swimming, and playing on the stone beach. However, during long periods of rain, eventually boredom would set in, and when we had played all the board games that were there, my brother and I started making our own games. These were simple games, often variations on existing board games, but what was important is that we were making them ourselves and we decided the rules. My parents were early adopters of computers as creative tools, and I remember the Atari ST that we had in the late 80s fondly. The ST was a computer that had powerful tools for page layout, digital painting, and of course, gaming. And as I entered my teenage years, I became more and more interested in computers. When I was 13, I started teaching myself the basic programming language, and this was a profound moment for me, as it was the first time I realized that I could make a computer do whatever I wanted, and I started making games. The games were silly, primitive text adventure games, but they were my own. They were fun to make and fun to play. They were born of an idea and turned into something tangible. And this was incredibly exciting for me because it was the discovery that the creative process applied to programming too. I continued to teach myself programming throughout high school, and when I graduated, I was faced with the decision about what to study at university. Did I pursue my love of arts and fine arts, or did I pursue my love of math and computers and study computer science? During the first 2 years of my computer science program, I became more and more frustrated. There was so much focus on the trees that the forest was starting to get lost from sight. I wanted to know how I could explore creativity through math and programming, and I wasn't seeing a way. However, after graduating, I eventually applied for and got a job at Electronic Arts in Vancouver. I started working at EA in 2004, and I've been making games full-time ever since. It was through game development that I found a way to combine my love of art with my love of math. So let's talk about games as culture a little bit more. When you talk to someone not intimately familiar with the world of gaming, what often comes to mind is that games are about male power fantasies set on alien planets where teenage boys run around with giant guns shooting each other while spewing vile sexist and racist slurs at each other over voice chat. While this may be true of some games, in the world of independent gaming, what we're seeing is an artistic medium growing right before our eyes, and many indie game developers are talking about the fact that we're in a golden age of indie development right now. Because of digital distribution channels like Steam, Xbox Live Arcade, PlayStation Network, and of course Apple's new App Store, independent developers are able to get their games in front of hundreds of millions of gamers, and this is creating real market demand for small, innovative games. Game development tools have progressed to the point where game developers don't need to understand as much about low-level hardware as they once did. Game engines, some of which are freely available, enable small teams to create sophisticated games and explore new ideas freely. Games as an artistic medium are becoming more and more culturally important, and I believe that many of the great artistic works of the next 10 or 20 years will come from games. Indie designers are using games to explore new ways of constructing narratives, or even abandoning narrative altogether. Game designers are exploring new emotional connections with their players. They're deconstructing the space between the visual, the audible, and the interactive. They're examining what it means to be a game. They're finding new ways to play. In other mediums, the viewer is a passive participant in the work. When you look at a painting, for example, you see the finished work. The artist has spoken, and you bring your personal interpretation. In a game, however, there is a constant dialogue between the game author and the player. The player makes a choice, and the game reacts. As someone who both designs and develops his own games, this is what excites me most. It gives me the potential to explore new creative directions through games, and in doing so, I am constantly faced with technical problems that stimulate and challenge me. Solving these problems is in itself a form of creative expression. The medium of games is still young, but it is maturing quickly. As my son's generation grows up with games as a medium that is ubiquitous, I can't help but think that games will become one of the most important cultural forces of his time. Thank you.